Kara for that wonderful introduction, and for Kaiser for your sponsorship of this event and the amazing things you do in healthcare. I want to say a few words about my amazing colleague Maxine Waters. I've known her for nearly 2 decades since I was a locally elected official. As you can tell from her energy and her grace and presence, she actually doesn't age. And I'm always thrilled to see her husband, Sidney. As some of you may know, I'm a long-suffering Cleveland Browns fan. He actually played for the Cleveland Browns, and we're all rooting for next season because, in fact, if the team wins just one game, it's infinitely better than this season. Want to thank Lori Brandt for your leadership of the Torrance Area Chamber of Commerce. I've gone to Red Car Brewery numerous times. Their chicken piccata dish is very good. And then every now and then, if you go on one of these mystery days, you can get their jambalaya, which is actually quite good. Or you can call her in advance, and she'll make sure that it's there. I also want to thank Donna Dupron for your amazing work on the Chamber of Commerce. I knew Donna when I did one of the hardest things in my life. I ran Leadership Torrance for Torrance Chamber of Commerce. And yes, anyone who's done that knows it's extremely difficult. And thank you for all that you've done. And to the amazing City Council and Mayor Fury and Terry for letting him do this. To your city treasurer, to your city clerk, and city staff and officials. I had a great time and an honorable time serving on Torrance City Council. As some of you may know, as a member of Congress, you could actually live anywhere. So I could live in Idaho and represent the 33rd Congressional District in California. But my wife and I choose to live in Torrance because we love this city. It's safe, it's fun, it's prosperous. So thank you for all that you do. And our 2 kids go to Torrance Unified Schools because it's a great school district. My son, by the way, is on the South High robotics team. I don't want to get them in trouble, but I just want to say, staying up to 3 a.m., not so good. But they got it done. Okay. So I'm going to talk about 3 topics today. First will be infrastructure, and then I'm going to talk about North Korea, because it turns out that nuclear war is not good for business. And then I'm going to talk about cybersecurity, because it affects all of you. So in terms of infrastructure, Congresswoman Waters did a great job talking about it. I want to add on to what she said. So last term, I worked with a bipartisan group of Southern California members of Congress, including Congresswoman Waters, and we fought for and got full Phase 1 funding for Metro's request to build out its light rail and subway. And in fact, as we stand here today, they actually are doing a groundbreaking and celebration of their Purple Line. That's going to right now extend through Beverly Hills and then keep on going eventually to the West LAVA. And then we're trying to get additional phases of funding and eventually get light rail down to the South Bay. And so we're fighting for that on a bipartisan basis, and it's something that's proceeding well. When I was in the California State Legislature, I worked with then Senator Jenny Oropeza, and we got authorization and initial funding for light rail to go into LAX. So at the time I thought, oh, this is great, and maybe my grandchildren will see that happen. Well, it turns out it's happening now, so it's very exciting to see that they are building light rail. I would have preferred light rail to go directly to LAX for different design reasons. They decided it was better to have it set aside from it, not directly in, and then move people into the airport. But regardless, it's going to be a much better transportation system than we have now. In terms of infrastructure overall, last year I worked on an infrastructure bill with other Democratic colleagues, and we introduced a $2 trillion infrastructure plan. And at the time, some of my colleagues in my own party, not Maxine Waters, she supported it, but some other folks thought, that's too much, that's too expensive. But then you look at the facts, and the American Society of Civil Engineers has issued a report saying we've got a $4.5 trillion infrastructure budget over the next 10 years. And then we were all very pleased when the President in the State of the Union put out the number 1.5 trillion. And we're like, see, we're all in the same ballpark. While there's different ways of trying to fund this, at least the White House recognizes the scale of the problem. And I think that's the first step, that we all understand the problem we're dealing with, to make sure we repair our roads, bridges, and highways, right? We can't actually have bridges that start falling down. And eventually that's going to happen if we continue to neglect some of this critical infrastructure. We're also in the 21st century, and my view is we need to have broadband everywhere, including in rural areas. And then we need to protect our critical assets with cybersecurity. There's been reports of dams that have been breached. That is not good. And so we need to make sure when we think of infrastructure, I think to have a cyber component as well. So this is something I think we can work with the White House on. Hopefully we can, as Councilman Waters says, fight and then get a good deal out of it. So we are working along that path, and happy to answer any questions after this if you have specific questions about specific projects. So let me tell you now about North Korea. I'm going to explain to you the problem. There's two problems. First problem is they are continuing to develop an ICBM capability that eventually will allow them to then put a nuclear warhead on it, miniaturize it, and then detonate it on the continental United States. They're not there yet. They can likely launch a missile over that likely will strike somewhere in the US, but they don't quite have the technology yet to miniaturize the warhead, to mount it on to make sure the warhead survives your entry and to have it detonate. But in a few years or more, they will get that capability. So that is a major problem. The second problem, and I'll start by saying I served on active duty at Andersen Air Force Base in Guam, and we at the time did a whole series of military exercises, much of it directed against North Korea, and there were exactly 0 good military options. So that is the second problem. We've got this North Korean growing threat. We have 0 military options that are good to deal with it. And let me sort of walk you through why we have 0 good military options. First thing is we have very little intelligence about this regime. We don't actually know where all their nuclear weapons are. We don't even know how many they have. So last year, Congressman Ruben Gallego and I wrote a letter to the Pentagon saying, look, your stated objective is to denuclearize North Korea. If you want to do this by force, how would you do it? And they wrote us back a very frank letter. Like when we read it, we thought, we think they actually want us to publish this and let the American people know. So we did. And it basically said, we're gonna need a full-on ground invasion. So this is not one of those scenarios like Syria, where the US can just launch 59 cruise missiles and walk away. We would need a ground invasion with lots of troops. They need to locate these nuclear weapons and then disable them, secure them, or destroy them. If we don't do that in the first few days of the war, we are in big trouble because they can detonate them. They could detonate them in South Korea, where in any given day, we have over 200,000 Americans, as well as millions of South Koreans. They could potentially launch them at Guam or in Japan, where we have a lot more Americans as well. So let's set aside the nuclear issue. If we just look at their other weapons, public reports indicate that North Korea has up to 5,000 tons of chemical weapons. When I was in Guam, we would do these exercises where we had to put on these chemical weapon suits. I hated doing that because one, it was hot. So Guam is hot, right? And then you put on this suit that makes you even hotter. It was bulky, it was difficult to walk around in it, difficult to see. But I remember every time I did this, I thought, well, it's nice I have this suit. And 99% of the people on this island do not. So that would happen in South Korea. They could just start launching chemical weapons over, and the lucky few who can get to a suit in time, put it on, they might survive, but a lot of people are gonna die from chemical weapons or get severely injured. Well, let's set chemical weapons aside. Just on their sheer conventional weapons, they have huge amounts of artillery, rockets, and other conventional arms aimed at South Korea. 20 million people are within striking distance of those weapons. They could just start firing off artillery shells, destroy lots of buildings, destroy lots of people. So I also got a letter from the former US Deputy Forces Commander of US Forces Korea. And on my Twitter account is actually the first thing you see. I pinned it there, and there's a letter. And he says some very interesting things. He says, look, in this war, in the first week, we're just gonna have a lot of losses. And it's because, unlike all our other previous engagements, we actually cannot build up our forces. So in Iraq, if you remember, months, right? We were sending over tanks, sending over troops. We were building up our forces for an eventual attack. The problem we have right now is we only have 28,500 US troops in South Korea. South Korea itself has about 500,000 troops. North Korea has over 1.1 million. So we start off outgunned, outmanned, and we cannot reinforce. Because the minute we start evacuating people and shipping over tanks and other things, North Korea will attack South Korea, because they'll know that we're about to launch a war. So in the first week, we're just gonna suffer these losses. We're gonna try to get reinforcements in. And predictions from third-party nonprofit organizations show that in a worst-case scenario, 2.2 million people could die, 7.7 million people injured. So that's the other side of this problem, right? You have two huge problems. So my view is we should look at the following potential solutions. You all remember during World War II, the US government basically made it the #1 priority to develop the Manhattan Project and to develop a nuclear weapon, and we succeeded. My view is we need to do a Manhattan Project for a defensive system that will prevent a nuclear weapon from landing on us. So I'm a big proponent of missile defense. There has been some amazing advancements in directed energy in the last several years. It's a fancy word for lasers. And by the way, it's so advanced now that the Army and Navy have contracted for lasers to mount on their ships and on their equipment to blow things up, to kill people, to destroy things. At some point, I believe we'll get to a point where these solid-state lasers will be strong enough to destroy an ICBM launching up in boost phase. And then you could have these unmanned drones that are far enough away from North Korea that they won't get shot down. They could just sort of hover there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it would be an anti-missile defensive system. So right now, we're not there yet. But North Korea also can't launch a bunch of ICBMs with nuclear warheads on us right now either. I don't want the case to be where 5 years from now they could, and we're still not there yet. So I am pleased that there is additional funding in the budget for missile defense, and hopefully we'll see the technological advancements go ahead with it. I had this tour of Northrop Grumman, by the way, last week. I saw their amazing space telescope. And I also told them that, hey, we needed that missile defense system 2 years ago. So they're working on it. It's not their fault. This is very complicated. Other thing we need to do is we need to explore, I think, every possible diplomatic option. And then we need to let economic sanctions have time to take their effect. I voted for, and Congresswoman Waters voted for, the strongest sanctions ever on North Korea. But that does take some time. I think we have to let that play its course, and it's not helpful for the administration in the present to issue threatening statements in the interim, because what we want to prevent is a fatal miscalculation. Some of you may have read the administration's thinking about doing something called a bloody nose strike, which essentially would mean that we would in fact use military force first against North Korea, maybe destroy a launch pad or do something, and hopefully that will cause North Korea to stop what they're doing. My personal view is I think that's a bad idea, partly because we don't know how they're going to react. We know they're a very paranoid regime. We know that they believe the US is going to attack them. And in fact, if we do attack them, they may go, oh my goodness, we're getting attacked, and they may go berserk, or they may not. But that is a pretty big risk. We just don't know. But the other problem is, I think it matters a lot how a conflict starts, if there were to be a conflict, in terms of what Russia or China would do. You may recall in the first Korean War, Russia and China did not support us. They supported North Korea. I believe if we initiated military force against North Korea, China, Russia may very well, again, not support us. If that were to happen, if they were to in fact support North Korea, it is game over. We do not win that war. If North Korea were to initiate military force, I think that's a different story. So I think we have to think about what that means if we were to go in first and do something. So that's where we are. There's not a lot of good options, but I do think we still have some time. We are not at imminent threat. And by the way, we right now also have a missile defensive system that is kinetic, that doesn't rely on lasers. And according to the U.S. Missile Defense Agency, if North Korea shot 1 or 2 ICBMs, we could handle it. We would essentially fire 4 of these anti-defensive missiles. They're actually based in California and Alaska, and we could likely take those down. So we're not at an imminent threat, but we will get there at some point. And I understand the impulse to want to attack North Korea. It is not irrational. If your view is that it is unacceptable for the North Korean regime to have an ICBM with a nuclear warhead that can strike Los Angeles, you would eventually attack them, because there's really no other way to try to stop that. But let me sort of give this view for those who think that that's the only option. On any given day, right, we can be annihilated by countries like Russia and China. Only reason that doesn't happen is we deter them. We deter them with our triad of ICBMs, of bombers, of nuclear submarines. So if your view is that North Korea can be deterred, if your view is that he is not, the leader of North Korea is not suicidal, then that's something you would consider, that, okay,